You've probably seen this idea floating around the internet, right? That saving your first $20,000 is some kind of magic number, a huge turning point in your financial life. But is it legit? Or is it just, internet hype? Well, let's dive in and figure out what's really going on. Of course, the legendary investor Charlie Munger famously said the first 100 grand is the hardest to get. And yeah, that's the big, shiny goal for a lot of us. But here's the thing. A different piece of wisdom has been bubbling up from the trenches online. And it points to a much, much earlier milestone that might be even more important. So what is the big deal with 20 grand? I mean, it's not enough to retire on. It's not I'm rich money by any stretch. So why does this specific number feel like the threshold where the entire game of money just starts to change? Not just mathematically, but maybe more importantly, inside your own head. And that's where we're going to start. Because the first and most profound change isn't actually in your bank account. It happens right between your ears. Think of it as a complete upgrade to your mental operating system. This slide lays it out perfectly. It shows two totally different ways of thinking. Before you have a real savings buffer, your brain is stuck in what you could call survival mode. Every single decision you make is filtered through this lens of scarcity and, frankly, panic. You're constantly just reacting, just trying to plug leaks in the boat. But once you cross that 20K line, you shift into strategic mode. You're not just putting out fires anymore. You can actually start thinking about growth, about the long term, about opportunities. And this is probably the best analogy for it I've ever heard. That cushion of savings is like having financial oxygen. It removes that constant, crushing pressure that keeps people trapped in short-sighted, bad decisions. For the very first time, you have the mental space to just breathe, to think, to actually plan your next move instead of just trying to survive the current one. And look, this isn't just a feeling. There's real data to back this up. Research from Vanguard actually found that having just $2,000 in savings can boost a person's financial well-being by a massive 21%. Why? Because it's just enough to pull your brain out of that raw, constant panic mode. Now scale that feeling up to $20,000 and you've basically built yourself a powerful psychological fortress. So once your mindset gets that critical upgrade, that's when the math starts to work its real magic. And this is where things get really fun. This is where you move beyond just feeling secure and into real, tangible, exponential growth. And this chart illustrates the point brilliantly. Let's imagine you save and invest $500 a month at a pretty standard 8% return. Getting to your first $20,000 takes you about 35 months. Now look at that second bar. Getting from $20,000 to $40,000 with the exact same savings habit only takes 26 months. That's almost a whole year faster. And why? Because now that first 20K is working right there alongside you. It's like you've cloned yourself. It's really just a simple, beautiful process. First, you do the hard work of saving. Then, that money you saved starts to earn returns. It's basically saving on its own now. And then, the magic happens. The returns on your money start earning their own returns. It's a snowball effect, and $20,000 is the point where that snowball finally becomes big enough to feel its own momentum rolling downhill. But there's an even deeper reason why crossing this threshold feels so transformative. And it's not some new idea. It's an old economic secret that explains why the value of a dollar isn't constant. It actually changes depending on how many of them you already have. It's all explained by something called the law of diminishing marginal utility. Now, that sounds super academic, right? But the idea is simple. The very first dollar you earn is incredibly valuable. It might buy you food when you're starving. The satisfaction, or what economists call utility, is massive. But what about the 10,000th dollar you earn? It gives you far less satisfaction because all your most urgent needs are already taken care of. Adam Smith explained this perfectly with his paradox of water and diamonds. Think about it. Water is essential to survive, but it's super cheap. Diamonds are totally useless for survival, yet they're wildly expensive. Why? Because for most of us, water is everywhere. The marginal utility of one more glass of water is basically zero. But one more diamond? That's a huge deal. Having $20,000 is like having your fill of financial water. It lets you stop worrying about dying of thirst and start thinking about maybe finding some financial diamonds. Okay, so let's bring all this theory back down to earth. This financial and psychological security, it isn't just some abstract idea. It unlocks tangible, real-world, life-altering options. This is what people mean when they talk about having walking away money. Just look at the story of poor Peter and rich Richard. They both earn the exact same salary, But where Richard has that 20K cushion. So when Peter's car breaks down, it's a full-blown crisis that pushes him into high-interest debt. For Richard, it's just an annoying inconvenience he pays for with cash. When a layoff hits, Peter panics. He has to take the very first job he can get, even if it's a step back in his career. Richard, he can be strategic. He can wait for the right opportunity and end up with a better job and an even higher salary. That one single difference, the 20K buffer, creates two completely different lives.
That buffer is freedom. It's power. All of a sudden, you can negotiate for a raise from a position of strength, not desperation. You have the actual power to leave a soul-crushing job without having another one lined up immediately. You can take a few $1,000s and invest in a new skill, a certification, or a side business that could totally change your income trajectory. These doors, they were always there, but before you were just too busy trying to keep the walls from caving in to even notice them.
And this leads us to the most important point of all. Seriously, the money is great. The options are life-changing. But the biggest prize, the most valuable asset you get from saving your first $20,000 is the person you had to become to actually do it. I absolutely love this quote from a user on Reddit. It captures that mindset shift perfectly. Saving stops being this stressful, painful chore you have to do. Instead, it becomes a strategic game. You're not just scraping by, you're building something, piece by piece. It actually becomes fun. Because what you've actually built isn't just a pile of cash. You've forged the habit of discipline day in and day out. You've mastered the incredibly powerful skill of delayed gratification, of saying no to something good today for something great tomorrow. And most importantly, you have fundamentally changed your identity. You're no longer someone who struggles with money. You're someone who is in control. You're a builder. And that transformation, that's worth way more than 20 grand. So no, $20,000 isn't going to make you rich. It's not the end of the journey, but it is the end of the beginning. It's the starting line for a completely new race, one where you're not just running to survive anymore, you're running to win. The only question left is, what are you going to do once you get there?